7foot4.com.
7foot4.com. Mark Eaton, former basketball player with the Utah Jazz, now a motivational speaker and businessman here at the GIC conference in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I understand you recently were in Dickinson, North Dakota, doing some public speaking. Talk to me a little bit about that.
I did. I was invited by the Five Diamond Industrial Park group up there in Dickinson to come up and speak at their economic summit that they put on last October. And they brought a wide variety of industry leaders and state and county and local government officials together for a day just to discuss the issues of what's going on in the Bakkens. And so it was an opportunity to, I speak about teamwork, but I was able to kick off the meeting and kind of get everybody at least on the same page about thinking about working better together. And I enjoyed my stay there, and fascinating to listen to the different issues and challenges that both the private and public sector faced up there and what they were doing to address it. So I learned a lot while I was there. I probably learned more than I gave them, I think.
Was that your first time in Dickinson?
It was my first time in Dickinson, yeah.
What was your observations, knowing that the town is supposed to have services and people for people of 15,000?
Well, you know, I thought the most fascinating aspect of the conference to me was listening to some of the county and government officials talk about what growth was going to be just temporary versus what was longer term growth. So which services do they need to provide right now, and then 8 or 10 or 15 years from now, who was still going to be there given the projected growth of the industry up there. And I thought that was the most interesting aspect. How do you decide how much money you put into new infrastructure versus what the long-term payoff of that extra infrastructure is going to be? So it's clearly a challenge. I mean, it's a good problem to have because you've got growth going on, but at the same time I could really see how maybe difficult it was for the leaders in the public sector anyway to decide where do we put our dollars, how do we spend, what do we really improve, and is the payoff going to be there over the long term? So
you can almost see where it's reversed. It's a good thing, but you don't want to let the horse out of the barn, because if the horse is out, boy, that's.
Yeah, and it sounds like they've been through some boom and bust up there before, and so they clearly have that experience to look back on and make their decision. But I just found it very intriguing and interesting to listen to both sides of the conversation.
Now, you mentioned teamwork and the working relationship between private sector, government sector, and even nonprofit, if you want to throw them in there. And it's almost a teamwork atmosphere to get things done. Coach Dale Brown and I spoke about longevity within an organization. If you look at sporting organizations historically that have longevity within their administration and coaching, that generally equals success. Your thoughts on that, and put that into the business world a little bit. How important is longevity in successful business?
I think it's very important. If you use the sports metaphor for a minute, you look at the great NBA teams, the Lakers, the Celtics, that core group of people does not change very much year after year, because it takes a few years to build that rapport and that understanding of each other out there on the court. And I think business is much the same way. We unfortunately live in a corporate environment now where people are constantly changing jobs and stepping on each other to try and get ahead. But the companies that you have a tendency to admire are the ones that do have that longevity, that do have the core group of management, core management team that stays together, the core sales team that stays together, because you learn how to work better together. And if you can understand the concept of teamwork and kind of get off of that tangent that, well, I just need to climb on everybody else if I'm going to get my career further ahead, and understand the concept that if the team wins, you win, then I think that bodes well for your long-term success. And I've certainly seen that as I travel around the country and speak to different businesses. The ones that take that attitude and are really there for their teammates and taking care of them, and let's work on this together, how can I help you and how can you help me, seem to have a much happier culture internally in their business, and seem to have much greater results from a bottom line perspective than the ones that are constantly changing and moving all the time. And this person goes and that one's coming in, and it's just, now we were doing management systems this way, now we're going to do them that way. There's no consistency and continuity, and people are just like, I'm just going to show up and put in my 8 hours and I'm out of here. So I think that's the culture that you have to look at if you're a boss or a CEO. Where do you want to go? What are your missions and values, and what do you want to stand for at the end of the day? Because your culture is going to have a direct impact on what your bottom line is.
Coach Dale Brown also said Coach Wooden from UCLA would not last today, because he didn't have his first winning season, or it took him 10 years about to get a winning season going and a winning team going, and he thought that was a travesty because of the way people are today for those reasons you just mentioned earlier. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think somebody like are there other John Woodens out there that we'll never get to see because they get cut right away, either in business, sports, or whatever?
I think in business and in sports, it's win now at any cost, and very little time is spent on developing your team, developing your philosophy, developing your players. And I think there's a lot of guys that get sold short, and a lot of coaches that get sold short because of that. So Coach John was a perfect example. He spent years building his pyramid of success and his baseline philosophy of what he came to believe team was all about, and which was evidenced by 10 national championships. And there's so little tolerance nowadays for, let's take this player and let him develop for a couple of years. Let's work with him. Let's assign a special coach to him. Let's really help train him to do his job well. We have a tendency in business now to go from the hiring to the judging space. And there's a great book written a number of years ago by Ken Blanchard called Raving Fans. And he talks about the missing component of coaching, that people don't spend very much time teaching people how to do their jobs and help them develop, and where do you want to go with your career, and how can I help you in the context of what we're doing here in this organization. So yeah, I think that's very true and unfortunate, and I hope that eventually it'll shift around the other way.
Any advice you might have for anybody looking at investing in the Bakken, getting out in the Bakken? I'm not sure your affiliation. Are you investing in the Bakken in any way?
No, I don't have any investment in the Bakken right now. No.
Any advice you might have, and whether it's a 24-year-old fresh out of school going out there to make his first million, or a 65-year-old seasoned veteran going out there. You've been out there, you understand communication, you understand relationships. It is kind of a blanket statement, I understand that, but any advice you might have for somebody who's looking at doing that, getting out there making $1 million?
Well, I think the opportunities are certainly there. I think you have to be smart about it, like any other thing. And oil and gas investment is a risky proposition in the best of circumstances. And again, to me, it goes back to who's the team you're working with. And it's fascinating when you listen to business investors talk about companies that are going to go public, or they're thinking about going public. The one thing they're always asking is, who's on your team? Who are your teammates? And so my best advice would be to find a great team. Find somebody that's really doing it well and go work for them and figure out what it is they're doing before you decide to strike out on your own or do something differently. But the one that has the best management team, the happiest employees, that's the person I want to work for.
Thank you very much, Mark Eaton.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. That was great. Thank you.